Lesson 2, I will decompose fractions as a sum of unit fractions using tape diagrams. This is the exact same learning target from Lesson 1. We are just going to continue what we started in Lesson 1 by breaking down fractions into addition sentences using tape diagrams. Alright, so here's your problem set, and it says draw and shade a tape diagram of the given fraction. Record the decomposition as a sum of unit fractions. Record the decomposition of the fraction two more ways. The first one has been done for you. Now you'll notice that here is the tape diagram that they drew. Here's the whole. They shaded 5/8 and they decomposed it three different ways. That's exactly what we're going to do. One of them has to be a sum of unit fractions. This is the sum of unit fractions. Whenever you do 1 over whatever the fraction is, these are called unit fractions. And then we're going to decompose it two different ways. So let's take a look at B. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to use my rectangle tool because it's hard for me to draw a nice, neat rectangle. But I want you to draw a nice rectangle. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to divide this into tenths. So the first thing I like to do, it's really important to try to make these nice and even. So when I divide it in half, that gives me 2 parts. I'm going to divide each half into 5 parts. So that means I'm going to draw 4 lines. So now this is 2 parts, 3 parts, 4 parts, 5 parts. So notice I drew 4 lines, it made 5 parts. I'm going to do the same thing over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to go back and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so we have 10 parts. So I'm going to label this one whole. Right now I'm going to shade 9 out of 10. Again, just take your pencil and shade really lightly. Don't worry about spending a whole lot of time coloring. I'm going to use this highlighter tool because I can shade really quickly with it. But if you'll remember, you can take your pencil and just really lightly shade. Make sure that you're not shading so dark that you can't see where you've divided the tape diagram into parts. Alright, so now we're going to do the next part. We're going to create a sum of unit fractions. So the sum of unit fractions means we're going to do each part individually. So we'll say 9/10 equals 1/10 plus 1/10, and we're going to do this 9 times. Okay, so here is our sum of unit fraction. We go back and count and make sure that's 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I've got one way. Now I have to do it 2 other ways. I'm going to write up here because I'm kind of running out of room. I've got room to do one right here. So what if I decided to do 9/10 equals 3/10 plus 6/10? So I could do 3 of these together and then the rest of them together. So now see if you can't come up with one more way by yourself. It may be different from mine. It may be the same for mine. But it has to equal 9/10. I think for my next one I'm going to do 9/10 equals 2/10 plus 7/10. Okay, maybe you came up with something different, and that's okay. All right, let's take a look at C. So this time we have 3 halves. The first thing you'll notice is that the number on top is bigger than the number on the bottom. So that means that we're going to have a tape diagram that's greater than one whole. So let's go ahead and draw our tape diagram. And the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to determine what part of this is going to be the whole, okay? All right, so this part, I'm going to draw a line, and this is going to be my whole right here. I'm going to go ahead and label that 1. And then I have to divide this into half. So here's a half. So I have 1/2, 1/2, and then I have an additional half. So this would be actually 3 halves, or 1 and 1/2. So we're going to go ahead and shade. So I'm going to use my highlighter so that you don't have to watch me color. You're going to use your pencil and you're going to lightly shade this in. We're not going to spend a lot of time coloring. All right, now we're going to make this we're going to do our unit fractions first. So that would be 3 halves equals 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. Now we have to do it 2 other ways. So what if we did 3 halves equals 2 halves plus 1/2? And I'm thinking of another way. I bet you might be thinking, well, Miss Jennings, 2/2 equals something different. What if we did this? 3/2 equals 1/2 plus 1/2. That would be another way to decompose this number sentence. All right, so let's take a look at number 2. Our directions have changed. Draw and shade a tape diagram of the given fraction. Record the decomposition of the fraction in 3 different ways using number sentences. So actually, it's pretty much looks like the exact same directions, doesn't it? So we're going to draw and shade a tape diagram of the given fraction. So the first one is 7/8. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to use my tool to draw a rectangle. Make sure that you're drawing your tape diagram big enough that you can tell what you're doing there. All right, so now we have to decompose this tape diagram into eighths. So I'm going to start by dividing it into halves, and then I'm going to divide it into fourths like this. By doing it this way, instead of just coming over here and drawing lines, it helps me to make sure that my tape diagram looks nice and even. So take the time to make it look correct. All right, so now I'm going to take each eighth and divide it in half, or excuse me, each fourth and divide it in half, and then I'm going to have 8 parts. So let's go back and count and make sure that I do have 8. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to go ahead and label my whole. So the whole thing makes one whole. And then I'm going to shade 7 out of 8 to show 7/8. Okay, now we are ready to create our number sentence. So it says to do it 3 different ways. So you'll notice we do not have to do, the only difference here is we do not have to do a sum of unit fractions. So I don't have to say 7/8 equals 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8, and that kind of takes a long time. So that's kind of nice that I don't have to do that. I think this time I'm going to say 7/8 equals 3/8 plus 4/8. See if you can't come up with 2 more, and they may be different from mine, and that's okay as long as they equal 7/8. Okay, I'm going to do 7/8 equals 1/8 plus 6/8, and then I'm going to do 7/8 equals 2/8 plus 5/8. Okay, all right, so let's take a look at B. Now, the first thing you're going to notice about B is that the number on the top, or the numerator, is bigger than the denominator. So that means that we're going to have a tape diagram that's going to be greater than 1/2. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to determine how much of this is going to be 1/2. So I'm going to draw a line right here, and I'm going to make this part my whole. Now, because my denominator is a 3, I know I have to divide this into thirds. So I'm going to go ahead and draw 2 lines. And now my whole is divided into thirds. I have to have 2 more thirds for a total of 5. So I'm going to divide this into half. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thirds. Now I'm going to shade. I'm going to shade all of them. Now I want you to come up with 3 number sentences that is a sum of fractions to create 5 thirds, and then come back. See if we got the same number sentences, or if any of ours are the same. Okay, so I'm going to do 5 thirds equals 2 thirds plus 3 thirds. And then I'm going to do 5 thirds equals 2 thirds plus 1. And then I'm going to do 5 thirds equals 1 third plus 4 thirds. So I wonder if any of our number sentences turned out to be the same. I bet at least one of them did, if not more. Okay? All right, so let's do 7/5. See if you can't do C by yourself. If you get stuck, you can always press play and follow along with me, but do as much of it as you can by yourself. The worst thing that happens is you make a mistake, you just erase it and you fix it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to determine my whole, because when I see a numerator that's greater than the denominator, I know that this is going to be greater than 1/2. So I'm going to go ahead and label this 1/2. My denominator is 5. That tells me I have to divide this into 5 parts. That means I have to draw 4 lines. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I've divided my whole into 5 parts, and I have to make 2 more out of this. So I should have a total of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I'm going to shade And now I have to write 3 number sentences. Now again, our number sentences may not be exactly alike, and that's okay as long as yours equals 7/5. All right, so I'm going to do 3/5 plus 4/5, and then I'll do 7/5 equals 1/5 plus 6/5, and then I'll do 7/5 equals 1 plus 2/5. Maybe you have some of these same ones. Okay, so D is just a little bit different. The only thing that's different with D is that instead of making this an improper fraction, they made it a mixed number. And that's okay, we can do this. So let's go ahead and draw our tape diagram. And again, I'm going to have one whole, and then I'm going to have an additional third. So I'm going to go ahead and mark off the part that's going to be my whole. So I'm going to use my pencil, and I'm going to label this one whole. Now, because the denominator in this fraction is thirds, that tells me that my whole has to be divided into 3 parts. I'm going to draw 2 lines. So now I've got 1, 2, 3 thirds, and this is my other third. This one's a little bit bigger, but that's okay. All right, so now I'm going to shading all of it this time. So I have 1 whole and 1 third. And now I have to come up with 3 number sentences. So I've got 1 and 1 third equals 1 plus 1 third. See if you can come up with 2 more. All right, so 1 and 1 third. I'm going to use my model this time. I'm going to say 2 thirds plus 2 thirds. 2 thirds plus 2 thirds. And then I'm going to say 1 and 1 third equals 3 thirds plus 1 third. Okay, so we have spent some time decomposing these and making these into number sentences. And we have created unit fractions by adding together the parts in our model. When you get ready to do your exit slit, make sure that you come back and use your problem set to go over it to make sure that to help you to understand. The most important part with these tape diagrams is to make sure that you are creating them nice and neatly so that you can read what you're doing.